So hi everybody, Dan Seffels here with Royal LePage Compass Estates. Excited to have our first ever video series, first episode with a great professional colleague with Ted Neufeld from Cornerstone Home Inspections. We're going to spend the next little while just chatting, talking about home inspections and what works and what doesn't and why you do it and how long you've been doing it for. Hopefully we can sprinkle in some funny stories. That would be great. I'm sure you've seen some pretty crazy stuff. And so, let's kind of jump into it. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how long you've been doing it for.
Yeah, sure. Ted Neufeld from Cornerstone Home Inspections. Been doing this for 18 years. I love it. I love what I do. I love educating the people about the house that they're buying. It's fun. It's kind of detective work. I got to figure out the house and then explain it to the client. So my background before that for 10 years was heavy equipment operations. So I dug pools, basements, did a lot of grading, replacing water lines, sewer lines. That's my background, kind of from the ground up to the foundation level is my background. And then, of course, it was nice to just mingle with other trades on job sites and talk to them and get background that way. Sure. And then, of course, I've done some schooling to have the knowledge that I have about the rest of the house. Mm-hmm. So that's my working career. Built trusses for a few years before that at a truss shop. So it's all helpful to kind of get the hands on and see that part. So I've got a wife and 4 kids, live in Niagara here. And just love what I do.
Perfect. So you talked a little bit about, or said that you did some schooling. So what is the educational part of this whole thing look like?
It's a good question because home inspection's not regulated.
Right.
Anybody can do it.
Is it self-regulated?
Yes. So we have an association, part of Ontario Association of Home Inspectors, although there's more associations out there, but it's the most widely known association. It carries the registered home inspector designation, and that's the most widely recognized designation, although I don't know how much the general public cares. In a sense, I think as an agent, I think you guys really are the consumers report, on home inspectors. You see many of us and who's good and who's bad. So I think it really comes down to who you guys trust as a home inspector. But I do have my registered home inspector designation and a national certificate, across Canada designation, for whoever that, for whoever cares about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And when you got those designations, is that like an in-class thing? Excuse me, an in-class learning, or is that like computer learning? Is that hands-on? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's not as much hands-on, believe it or not. It's mostly textbook style or correspondence style. The Ontario Association of Home Inspectors requires you to take X, Y, and Z as far as courses goes, and you can take that online or you can go in class. Sure. So, and then once you do the classes that they want you to, then you can get your designation as a registered home inspector.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So we use TED, I'm going to say 85, 90% of the time, because of the kind of the trust and rapport that you're talking about. It's interesting when we look at kind of the difference between a kind of a good home inspector and a bad home inspector. From our perspective, a lot of it has to do with some of the way that you talk about some of the issues you reach in a house. Yeah. So can you talk to me a little bit about your approach to that kind of client care side of it? Yeah. So you come to a house, every house has problems, right? Yep. Even brand new ones.
Correct. Yeah.
So what's your kind of approach to that client care side of the business?
Yeah. I feel like I'm not an alarmist. So like you said, every house has issues that could be corrected and fixed. And I try and relay that to people and say, there's always a typical list of things that every house has. And usually talk about 4 bigger ticket items: the roof and furnace, air conditioner, and windows. Get the ages of those, how long they should typically last, and in this particular house, how long they're going to last. But every problem can be fixed, really. It's just money to fix the problem, right? So I like educating the people, and when I can see their eyes start to get bigger and bigger and more nervous about the house, then maybe I can tell that maybe they're in too far, and maybe this is more than what they expected. Now, it's not my job to say don't buy it. I would never say not buy the house. I would say, this is the information we found. Talk to Dan about it. Typically, you're there anyways, and you're listening and hearing in on what we're talking about, and then we can have that discussion. But I just like educating the people about the house, putting it into practical terms, and kind of giving the person an inventory list of the house and say, this is what you have. Do you want it the way it is? Is this what you expected when you put the offer in? And then we go from there. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think that's a great way to describe it as kind of not an alarmist, right? Because to your point, everybody has those aha moments. So talk to me a little bit, kind of building on that kind of not an alarmist approach. Talk to me a little bit about the difference between how you handle a first-time home inspector with kind of a parent who comes along.
First-time home buyer.
First-time home buyer who comes along with the parent who, maybe has some experience, maybe quasi-construction, versus a more mature home buyer who's done this a number of times already.
It's interesting because I'm not too proud to think that other people don't know more than me. Like a lot of contractors, someone might be an electrician. They're going to obviously know more than me about that specific area. And so I continue to try and just do my thing and just walk through room by room. And it's amazing how I find that usually after the guys that, the guys or girls that are more educated and know houses, I think they're more impressed than they originally thought. I don't know if they thought this was just going to be a rubber stamp or what they thought it was going to be, but it does feel different when you move room by room, even into a bedroom, and you spend 5 minutes in a bedroom. You check the receptacle, the window, you look for cracks and water damage on the ceiling, you look in the closet, and they start to realize, there's more to it than what we originally thought. So I have had the comment by a lot of tradesmen that say, "Wow, you were more thorough than we expected at a home inspection," and that is it is helpful because when you walk through a house with somebody before they put the offer in, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour, but when we go through the inspection and it's an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and you go room by room and area by area, it has a different feel to it as you flow through it. So I try to just talk to the buyers and not ignore the parents or those people, but talk to the buyers, see where they're gauging or how they're following me, and of course I answer all the questions that I can.
Right.
But it's fun navigating that too. It's a little bit of work sometimes, sure. but I'm not. Been doing it 18 years. In the beginning, I'm sure I was more intimidated than I am now. But now it's just like, well, whatever. I'm going to tell you what I know, and they follow along.
Yeah. So contrast that to somebody who's done this a bunch of times. So when you do a home inspection for somebody who's, this is their 7th, 8th, 9th house, whatever. How is the experience different, and your experience with the buyer different?
I think probably terminology. For one thing, they would understand what I'm saying more than a first-time home buyer. Yeah. Not that I would go just breeze over issues, but I might not have to specifically say that receptacle is loose or some minor problem to somebody that's bought 7 or 8 houses or that's going to do cosmetic work. They're just not even going to really pay attention to those types of things. So they might be more concerned about the ages of those big ticket items, or is there any structural concerns, and kind of listen to those things more. And I do those people tend to do their own thing a little bit more during the inspection as opposed to a first-time buyer.
Right.
But I definitely invite people to walk around, honestly hang over my shoulder and see what I'm doing and look at what I'm doing, and we can talk it through as we go.
For sure. So I think one of the biggest questions that comes up in this whole realm is liability, right?
Yeah.
So you buy a house, I go through it with a buyer, and we see some stuff, we don't see some stuff. They say, okay, we're going to put a finance condition on the offer. We bring you in to do it. You're going to find some stuff. Invariably, you're going to miss some stuff. Nobody's perfect, right? Yep. And whether it's latent or whatever material. How does that part of the equation work for you? I mean, obviously, you're not responsible for everything that is in the house. Talk to me a little bit about how that works.
Well, yeah, it's a good point, because it's not a warranty or a guarantee.
Yeah.
Because I didn't build it, I can't guarantee the work. But the way, if you really boil it down, if I can see it, I can inspect it.
Right.
right? So I can't see things behind the walls, but I've got tools that check the receptacles, make sure they're wired correctly. I've got an infrared camera, moisture meter, to look at, not through the walls, but just gives us an idea of what might be behind the wall if the temperature is different or if there's moisture there, obviously. So, I remember one time when I missed that there was no heat source in a bedroom. Well, that's my fault. I should have found it. I should have seen it. So I paid for the guy to put a heat source in, to run a duct up into the bedroom. So yeah, you're right. Nobody's perfect. And so I always say to people, I'm going to come clean if I've missed it, and I could have seen it. That's the best way to put that. Yeah.
I remember one specific scenario, and I'm not sure if you remember this house, but we found the bad kind of Kitech PEX in the house. And I remember what you told us is you said, okay, so I think this is probably the bad kind of PEX piping. Get a plumber in to have a look at this, because this is not my expertise. So bring somebody else in who knows, more about that particular area. Right?
For sure. And that's what I do. It's like a general practitioner doctor. You go to them and you have a sore knee, they would send you to a knee specialist, right? And so same thing. If I see something that I suspect is asbestos or mold or water damage, then sometimes, because we can't always find the source, sometimes I think people want to find the source of the problem and figure out how to solve it. And that's not the objective of the home inspection. It's to find the problem, and then if we can, great. But a lot of times you have to do a little bit more digging, call the electrician to come in and give you a little bit more information about that situation.
Yeah. Because if you find mold in the attic, it's likely that it wasn't vented properly from one of the fans or whatever.
Yeah.
But it could be a million different things.
Yep.
So Ted, you said you've been doing this 18 years. Full-time gig, I assume, at this point. Yeah.
Yep.
How many a year do you do? How many of these inspections a year, or maybe a month or a week? Like, what's the measurement that you would look at?
A year is probably 300, give or take. Last 2 years during COVID and the market, the way it was down to about 50%.
Wow!
So that was significant the last 2 years. So, but recently in the last 6 months, it's changed a bit and kind of gotten more towards normal. But yeah, 10 a week is a busy week. That's a busy week, long week, full days for sure. But yeah, we go with the flow. Have done some energy assessments as well, sprinkled in there. It's kind of a similar type of job. So I'm certified to do an energy assessment on the house as well.
Well, I can feel you with the 50% fewer inspections, because there are 50% fewer houses being sold.
Yeah, that's right. There's slim pickings.
We're all in the same game as far as that goes.
Yeah.
So you've been doing 18 years. You do, in an average year, about 300 houses, which is great. Talk to me a little bit about the difference and how you approach kind of, and you and I, we've done some huge houses and we've done some really, really small houses. How do you approach those differently, if at all?
I would say it's not that much different. It's more of a mindset walking up to the house and seeing a 4,000 square foot house as opposed to a 700 square foot house. Right. It's really just breaking it down room by room, kind of just like eating an elephant one bite at a time, literally. So, just pick away at the different areas, walk around. Don't forget my systems that I have, and kind of do the same system, and I'll end up at the same spot.
Right. And
so it just takes a little bit longer. Yeah. Just gotta. Some of those times you take a lunch break on a big house. You actually sit down and take a lunch break. Normally, 2-3 hours. You get through it. You get the job done. You get the report done. But sometimes you just need to sit down for a bit.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember we did one house in St. David's, and it had these ridiculous roof. They're super steep. Because normally you go on the roof to check things out.
Right.
In scenarios like that, so, I mean, how do you handle a situation where you can't go up on the roof? Or talk to me about some of those things where you're like, well, normally I would do this, but because of circumstances I can't. What would be some of those examples?
Roofs are a good one. Drones are becoming more popular. Looking into that. Believe it or not, like, for the most part, I can get onto safely. I would say 90% of the houses and roofs that I inspect, and I feel better always getting on it, because from the ground it looks this way, and then you get on top and you're looking right down on it, and sometimes the granulars are look totally different. So I think it's helpful to get up there for sure. At least a ladder up to the edge to look at it. Or I've got a set of binoculars as well that I can get back from different areas. Sometimes maybe you don't even know this as well, but sometimes in the different neighborhoods, before I arrive at the inspection, I will go to the street behind it or the street around it and look at the roof from the different angles if I know I won't be able to access it, and use binoculars from there as well. I always wonder what the neighbors are thinking. I'm looking at this house through behind their house, but anyways. Yeah, there's always scenarios where there's maybe too much storage. You know, we move as much as we can within reason. I don't want to break anybody's Royal Dalton, so I'm going to stay away from that kind of stuff. But that's part of what people have to understand, and I try to explain are the limitations, because that's where I get into trouble and someone else gets into trouble, is when they expect I can do this, but this is all I can do.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were going to ask something about that.
Well, I was going to. So, because one of those areas is crawl spaces, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not as common maybe anymore, but there was a stretch there where we had a bunch of crawl spaces. How do you handle that?
Yeah, and again, if I can get in, I'll get in there. I've got coveralls. Some parents, or have wondered if I'm going to get dirty or into the crawl space. Well, I've got coveralls and I can get in there, and that white suit, and so. And I had an agent the other day ask if I could get into this certain crawl space, if I could just inspect the crawl space, which I would do as well. But there's standing water, so obviously I can't get into that space. Not safe, let alone getting all muddy and going for a swim. But so there's limitations. Crawl spaces are a good one. Try and do my best to get into that space, take pictures, and take a look the best we can.
Yeah, report back, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. What is both the largest house that you've ever inspected and the smallest one you've ever inspected?
I did an inspection on Trish Romance's house on the Parkway. Wow. Now I think there might be 2 houses there now, 3 houses there, because they severed it off. But it was a square footage, I can't even remember. I think it was around 6,000. 5,000, and then maybe the garage, living space above the garage, and her studio as well. And so there's been some big ones like that. I actually would prefer normal 1,200 square foot bungalow. Not just the intimidating factor, but just less moving parts, obviously. And the smallest one, I don't know offhand. I mean, some of these smaller ones typically would have crawl spaces as well, so they're like a 700 square foot house sometimes, right?
I remember one in particular in the falls that we did. It was like an 800 square foot with a crawl space. Yeah. I would almost imagine you like those less than a 1,200 square foot bungalow with a regular basement, right?
Somebody said at an inspection a couple of days ago, someone said, so is it less money because there's no basement to do the inspection? And the agent said, no, it should be more money because he's going to get under there and do the work. And surprisingly, those smaller houses don't always take exponentially less time. They still take the hour and a half to go through room by room. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the big parts of your job, Ted, we talked about at the beginning of our discussion here, was kind of identifying those 4 big areas and some of the life that's left in some of these appliances and stuff. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you look at furnaces and windows and air conditioners and roof. Like, so you go to a house and, certainly here in St. Catharines, a lot of stuff that's in the 70s, whereas I've seen fewer and fewer of original stuff. A lot more that's kind of been renovated once. Maybe in the 90s. Yep. So when you go to look at a house and it's like, wow, we're getting near the end of the life cycle, what are your conversations with them, with the buyers about those 4 kind of items?
Big ticket items. Yeah. And if I backtrack just a second, if you boil inspection down to what it is making sure the house is working like it should. And that's as simple as it is, but then there's just 1,000 checks to do that. So for those items, for instance, they have a lifespan, and I always say for a certain number of those things, like a roof, you want to be proactive. Obviously, you don't want that to leak. Furnace and air, I would say there's no reason to replace it until it breaks. Yes, it might not be as efficient, so you're paying a little bit more on the gas bill. Not the end of the world, but I always like to kind of put it back in a buyer's court and say, I don't know how much money you have to spend, and I'm not here to spend it, but this is how old your furnace or air conditioner are, and if air is really important to you, then set aside some money. And if the furnace is, obviously furnace, you need heat, so that's a different story as well. But windows as well. Sometimes a 30-year-old window hasn't lost its seal, still functioning properly. Well, I don't come in and say you have to replace those windows. That's on a budgetary list because they are 30 years old. But you could maybe push it off for 5 years while you do other things in the house. So yeah, it's just nice for a buyer to know where those ages are, how close they are to having to replace it, and maybe just to budget for it in the future. Yeah.
Should people do another inspection? So I buy a house, 5 years, 7 years has gone by. Never mind whether it's a pre-listing inspection, but just when it's my own house. Should I get another inspection? Should I have you come back and if a number of years later and have a look at it again?
It depends, I would say, how green you are or how hands off you are. If you are not into maintenance and you pay someone to mow your lawn and clean your eaves out, which is nothing wrong with that, then maybe you're a little bit removed from being aware of what's going on. Most people don't spend time in their attics. I don't blame them, but maybe that's a time after 5 years might, depending on how old the house is, but it's good. And I call that a maintenance inspection. What do we do next on the house? And sometimes this falls under the category of an older couple or an older person not knowing what to do next on the house, or if anything's looming that they're not aware of. So it definitely is a good idea to give that maintenance checklist of things to do. And I mean, I prioritize it where I see fit, but I always tell people, if that's not important to you, just move it down the list. You make your own priority list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting you talk about maintenance inspection. So because I know that we brought you over to one of our rental properties where there was a leak in the roof.
Yep.
And we couldn't find where the stupid leak
I don't know.
was.
Do you still? I don't know.
Still haven't found it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like moisture meters, and we're in the attic. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what different service offerings you have. So I mean, I'm most familiar with. We have a house with an inspection clause, a condition in the contract. We bring you in to do that.
Yeah.
What else do you offer? What else do you provide to clients and agents?
Nothing.
We just did it.
I was going to say, where am I going to go with this question? I've tried mold testing, indoor air quality testing, and I mean, this is just a business decision on my part. It's taken more to kind of ramp that up and make people aware of what those are the things that I do. That I've just kind of dropped it and said, I'm sticking to home inspection. I'll refer other people to mold or asbestos or different items like that. Now, like I said, I have done energy assessments. I can do energy assessments, depending how busy I am, but that is the only other service that I could do and would do.
Okay. Yeah. So within the home inspection category, there's a couple of different options, right? So there's the one after an offer is accepted that's conditional on inspection. There's a pre-listing inspection, right, which I know we've done a couple of times. And then there's especially in what's going to be a competitive offer situation, there can finally be that pre-inspection. So do you use those?
Yeah, so in that sense, yeah. So a normal inspection when someone's buying a house, pre-listing if you were about to sell your house and want to know what the good, bad, and the ugly is that you have. And then, kind of the 1 hour walkthrough, a little bit frowned upon in the industry as far as it's a gray area. Right. What do I inspect? What do I not inspect? I could get into trouble because I didn't inspect this. And so it's the expectation part here where, you didn't inspect this. Well, no, I had an hour. Right. And so, but that is something that during the COVID market, we stepped into and did a bunch of that. A shorter time frame, cheaper inspection, just to give you a legs up on what to offer in the house, and just a little bit more information.
Well, because I remember when we did a few of those during the craziness, and my expectation is that we're going to hit it again, not in the immediate future, but within the next while, I think we're going to get crazy again. And I think from my perspective, it was let's talk big ticket. Right? So we don't need to check all the receptacles and the water pressure, but boy, do we ever need to know if there's water behind the walls, or if there's
Yeah.
insulation in the attic, and
Yeah.
some of those bigger ticket, or mold, God forbid,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I know that was something that we did a few of. Perfect. So that's kind of what you've done in the past. Is any kind of closing thoughts? Anything that you think we haven't talked about that we should?
I have to edit this one. I got to think for a second. Yeah, I don't know if. I can't think of anything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Ted.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you coming and having a chat with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.